been waiting for a chance to tell you about Gene Cohen and some of his work on the mature mind. And getting to know Gene before he passed away was one of the gifts that I had. And he had a brilliant idea that's now really being supported by new science, but I'm going to go back to the beginning. I remember Gene telling stories about how the mature mind over about the age of 50 isn't better or worse than it was when it was younger. It's just different. It has different abilities, different capabilities. And one of the magnificent ideas that Gene came up with was that if a younger brain understands that there are things that that brain will be able to do because it becomes 50, 60, and 70, that's something to look forward to. Well, science has proved that he's been right. So what I want to do is take you through 3 examples of what Gene would call a mature mind. The idea that an older brain can solve problems in a different way that might even be better than a younger brain might balance out with the lack of speed. Speed of processing is something that is always the measuring stick, that the older brain slows down when it gets older. Well, Gene had ideas that maybe there's a reason that it slows down. So when he realized that he was onto something, he needed examples, and here's one of the ones that he used. He said Darwin, on that wonderful ship, the Beagle, gathered all this information and put them in books. And when he went back to England, he started his teaching career, and those books became stable reference books that really didn't amount to anything. So years went by, and he would look at them again. The same material looked at years later, when he turned approximately 50, were seen as the body of a book that we now know as The Origin of Species. And the evolution theory simply was not put together by a young brain. It was put together by a mature mind. We might even say that when he gathered that information, Darwin had an immature mind, and he needed seasoning. He needed experience. And that's what an older brain has. And then Gene tells this story. He talks about his own father-in-law. His mother-in-law, father-in-law came to Washington, D.C. to visit, and Gene said, we've got a beautiful day planned. It's midwinter, and you've got the National Gallery of the Arts. You can spend all day there. I'll drop you off. Here's our address in Kensington. You simply take the metro, which is down below. You don't even have to come up and see the surface. You just spend your day in the gallery, and then you take the metro and get the Kensington station, go up on top, hand it to a taxi driver, you're home. Little did Gene or anyone else realize, but in the winter storms that sometimes come through, they have what's called a flash snowstorm. Flash snowstorm is something that really isn't predicted with much lead time. So here was his mother and father-in-law, deep in the basements and in the gallery and having a wonderful day. Late afternoon, Gene realizes that the snowstorm's coming, no way to contact them because of traffic that was already jamming up. And here's Gene on the way home, stuck in traffic with snow mounting up, wondering how are they going to possibly get home, because he knew something. And that's that when there's a flash snowstorm on the East Coast, there's a phenomenon that he described as disappearing taxicabs. You can't find them anywhere. So here's his father-in-law and mother-in-law on the metro, dry as a bone. They didn't know what was going on. They came up like prairie dogs coming up and looking out at new fallen snow in literally a blizzard, and they thought to themselves, what are we going to do? Over 70 years old, this couple looks around and sizes up the situation, looks across the street, and they see a steamy window. They trudge across the street, they walk in, they have the address. They look up and say, we'll have a large cheese pizza to go, deliver it to this address, and one more thing, take us with you. And when Gene pointed out that when he got home worried, the taxi cab or the delivery truck had pulled up, and out pops his father and mother-in-law with the pizza, and they say, let's eat. Now, a mature mind was able to do that, size up what was going on, not panic. A younger brain might have cursed a few times, wondered what to do, and never figured out that you deal with something in a positive way to say, how do we make the best of this situation? And the other one I want to tell you about happened after Gene passed away. It's called The Miracle on the Hudson. We all remember those pictures of the plane that landed on the Hudson River. Remember the name of the pilot? He's famous. We know him as Sully. Sully landed that plane and had no room for error. He was how old? He was 57, almost 58 years old, when in that moment that could have been a panic and a disaster, his emotions were in control. He said, I had time to think. He didn't have a lot of time, but he had time to think, and the reanalysis of that wonderful landing that he made, but those moments that tick by was that he and his crew made every decision right because they didn't panic. He landed it, and afterwards he told Katie Couric on the first interview, in answer to the question, were you scared? He said, no, but I was challenged. How beautiful is that, that his brain felt that he was trained for just what was happening, and he relied upon his crew to give him all the things that he figured he needed, and then he made the decision. He was a mature mind. In an earlier generation, he'd be told, I'm sorry, you're too old, you must retire. But here he was, almost 58 years old, landing that plane, becoming a hero, and we found out that both of his cabin mates were both over the age of 50. We have 3 mature minds in the cockpit. And then we found out something else. The plane landing and the passengers, those famous pictures of the passengers on the wings, they would not have survived except for a flotilla of tugboats, of ferries. Every type of craft on the Hudson came to the rescue. When we looked at the facts on this, we found out another interesting tidbit about the mature mind. Every one of those tugboat ferry captains were over the age of 50, and not one of them called up and said, do I have permission? They did it because they had mature minds, and we were sure that a younger brain would have done it, but that's the type of story that Gene Cohen would have said is an example of a mature mind in action. So Gene, that story's for you.